Hello there, healthy Americans. I put together some paperwork that might help deny these forced face masks, because yes, they are unlawful and unconstitutional, which is what I'm going over right now. I made a full packet of paperwork, starting off obviously with the Constitution, because if they can find anywhere in the Constitution that says you can force a face mask onto my body, I'll gladly do it, right? But they're not going to find it. So next, we have this message to the manager, which Peggy Hall has designed very nicely for us. She's made a very coherent message for the manager, and if they still don't get it, then that's when I bust out this file folder full of paperwork for them to really understand. So I live in Humboldt County, California, and here our Humboldt County health officer is Teresa Frankovich. That's the person who gets to decide all of our health orders. And so this is a facial covering health order, and this is the actual law that many people in stores around here would like to reference and say, well, it's the law. And I say, well, what penal code are you referencing? And I even said that to a police officer once, and he said, well, there is no penal code. It's just a health advisory. And I said, exactly. Right. It is an advisory, advice. All right. And in the health advisory, it says facial coverings should not be placed on anyone who has breathing problems. Now, breathing problems, that's a pretty broad term, right? That could be anyone with a medical condition referring to breathing problems. Now, this is what gets us into the definition of a disability, because any major life activity, such as major bodily functions, such as breathing, do count in the state of California legally as a disability. So you are actually quite literally disabling yourself by putting on a mask, right? You are making yourself a disabled person by wearing a mask, by definition, right? And then we have the Americans with Disabilities Act, which says that an individual with a disability is defined by the ADA as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So again, another legal code showing that any breathing problem, including wearing a mask as a breathing problem, is considered a disability. Now, you are protected by HIPAA if they ask you what your disability is. So you don't have to tell them, I have asthma, or I have heart palpitations, or I have whatever issue it is that prevents you from wearing a mask, because that is protected by definition by the patient-doctor confidentiality. So whenever they ask you, what's your medical condition, you can retort with, what is your legal standing for even asking that question? Because only a medical doctor, someone who's licensed and active as a medical doctor, has the right to even inquire about your medical history or your disabilities. Otherwise, they would be breaking your privacy rules, right? And here's the facial coverings guidance for the California Department of Public Health, which does say face coverings may increase risk if users reduce their use of strong defenses. Now, it's ironic how oxygen is a strong defense and how sun is a strong defense, yet we're ordered to stay at home. And yet human contact and the microbiome gut and herd immunity, these are all considered strong defenses, but we're also ordered by our health officer to basically ignore those other strong defenses. Right, so they're putting us in a medical situation where face coverings actually would do nothing, and nothing but increase virology, disease, death, All of these orders actually have done way more damage than they could possibly have done good. You cannot convince me otherwise at this point. Okay, so now we get on to California Code 5144 with Cal OSHA, which this particular, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but this particular document states that if any employer or an employment facility demands that an employee wear a facial covering, a respirator, or a face mask, that employer is then required to provide a licensed medical physician to do a medical examination on the employee to make sure that they are physically fit enough to, medically, no heart problems, no breathing problems, to wear a mask for 8 hours a day doing whatever labor that they have to do. I know plenty of people who have passed out, had heart issues, had to quit their job, just physically, medically cannot comply with this. And they don't realize that they are legally defended by the state of California. They don't even realize that they quit their job for no reason. They could have fought against that. There's laws that protect us. We have a constitutional right to our own bodies. Nobody can come in and say, I am now your doctor and I am now making your medical decisions for you. No Costco employee, no health officer of your county, no CDC, WHO official can be your acting doctor just because they decided to be. Whenever they make these arbitrary rules and laws based on some model that was made that was really, really incorrect. Looking back now, that model was in la land, why they locked everything down. It should be a war crime. I think people should go to prison from our government for this. I'm not going to name names here. I think you know who I'm talking about, but there are several people who belong in prison. All right, moving on. Any person who practices or attempts to practice or advertises or holds himself or herself out as practicing any system or mode of treating the sick or afflicted in the state, or who diagnoses, treats, operates for, or prescribes any ailment, blemish, deformity, disease, disfigurement, disorder, injury, or any other physical or mental condition of any person without having, at the time of doing so, a valid, unrevoked, unsuspended certificate. So that's saying that anyone who pretends to give medical advice that is not an active doctor can be fined $10,000. So all these people, but we're going to get fined if we don't make you wear a face mask. Yeah, well, OSHA is going to fine you for not only acting as a doctor, but let's talk about discriminating against someone based on their disability. You don't just ask someone to leave your store because they're in a wheelchair. That's against the law. And if you think that this little slap on the wrist for not wearing a facial mask is going to affect your store, try being shut down permanently, right? We're talking about covering up a small offense with a way bigger offense, right? In fact, multiple offenses. You're acting as a doctor and you're discriminating. And I'm sure there's several others that you could add on that I'm going to go over now. The California Civil Code, it says all persons within jurisdiction are free and equal no matter their disability or medical condition. No matter. So if you have asthma, if you have any medical condition that constitutes a breathing problem, you have the right to be free and equal. They cannot ask you to leave because you have a medical condition and are refusing to wear their mask because they don't even have a right to medically advise that you wear a mask. It's not even their right. And this is a more full text of that same law that goes over the individual freedoms that we all get. I don't know how that got upside down. So what is a medical procedure? Well, this is the definition of a medical procedure according to the NIH. A course of action intended to achieve a result in a delivery of healthcare. Now, advising someone to put on a face mask for the object of improving health or treating disease is acting as a doctor. You are giving medical advice for a medical procedure, right? You are giving medical advice for a medical procedure, which only licensed doctors can do. So these clerks saying you must put on a mask, well, where's your license, doctor? Doctor, gas station attendant. Where's your, when did you get licensed and what school did you go to? Right? They don't even have a right. What is the NIH definition of a clinical trial? Human subjects with one or more interventions to evaluate the effects of those interventions on health-related biomedical or behavioral outcomes. Now this whole everybody has to wear masks, social distance, stay at home, quarantine, these are all by definition clinical trials. We are human subjects. This is not something that they understood and knew the outcome of. This was a trial. This was by definition a clinical trial. And mind you, legally, if you take part in a clinical trial, you must give full informed consent. That's part of the rights of participating in a clinical trial, especially without your knowledge or consent. That is by definition a war crime, and I'll get into that in a couple papers here. Now this part doesn't have to do with face masks. It does have to do with forcing vaccines. Just this page here, we'll go right back to face masks. The definition of surgery. The definition of surgery is includes any injections, needles, and anything that basically breaks the human skin. And so when someone says, oh, it's just going to give you a quick shot, that is surgery, and you have rights to refuse surgery. That is just you always have a right to refuse surgery, and you always have a right to a second opinion when it comes to surgery. That is actually your medical right. But this video isn't about that. But it is about informed consent, right? You are supposed to know with informed consent what the diagnosis is, the nature, the purpose, and the recommendation of interventions. And guess what? The burdens, risks, and expected benefits of all options, including foregoing the treatment. This is part of just consent to wearing a mask. They did not give us any of these things. No part of informed consent with the Code of Medical Ethics was followed for this health advisory notice for forcing people to wear masks. This has no legal standing whatsoever. And let's go into what legal stand, what is it breaking, right? Well, we have the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, known as UNESCO. Inside UNESCO, you have to have informed consent and all of these, the fundamentals of equality of human beings and dignity and their rights and, all those things that I guess America has forgotten over the years, because we have the Nuremberg Code, something that I guess people forgot since World War II, that doctors have been systematically practicing on patients without their consent, illegally, immorally, testing things on them that they sometimes know that they don't work or will have an adverse effect. The Tuskegee experiment just being one silly off example, right? There were doctors that gave those needles to people knowing there was syphilis in them. That's why we have the Nuremberg Code, right? That's why we have UNESCO. That's why we have the Declaration of Helsinki. These are to protect us from doctors, from the very people that we're supposed to trust. We have the right to stand for our own body, our own freedoms, our own medical decisions, period. And if you want to get into informed consent, here's 30 pages of what informed consent means in the medical field. I'm not going to go over that now. I think you know what medical consent is, but not a lot of people apparently do, right? You actually have to tell them that you want to be a part of the clinical trial. They can't just decide that you are. And here's the advice on the use of masks in the context of COVID-19 from the World Health Organization. Now, I'm going to start pointing out some very specific languages because these languages do matter, and you'll see why here in a second. They make a lot of contradictions and a lot of crisscross phrases that, when you break it down to their etymological roots, quite often don't make sense and are complete gibberish. Stay with me for a couple paper articles here, because it's going to wrap back around once I try to make sense of all this. And so, first of all, they say, however, the use of a mask alone is insufficient to provide an adequate level of protection. So they're saying here that masks by themselves don't do anything. All right, there's a limited evidence that wearing a medical mask by health individuals in the household or among contacts of sick patients or among attendees of mass gatherings may be beneficial as a preventative measure. There is currently no evidence that wearing a mask by a healthy person is beneficial. There's no evidence. This is the World Health Organization saying that there is no evidence. So what evidence are you using to base this off of? Like, because the law is based off of science, right? You have a scientific method that shows that legally X causes Y, right? That's how we come up with laws. This doesn't follow that procedure. This is a law that references no science. And in fact, when you look at it, the incubation period of COVID-19, which is the time between exposure to the virus and symptoms onset, pre-symptomatic transmission. If you look at the way that they actually word it, they're making mistakes that I don't think that they've realized that they've made. Right? And I don't think anyone else has caught this either. And maybe I'm one of the only people that actually reads these legal documents from beginning to end, word for word. And maybe that's the only reason why I caught it. But I want to show you something important. This one right here. This might be the biggest piece to this entire thing. I want you to pay very close attention to what I'm about to show you. This is called Koch's postulate. Now, Koch's postulate is a medical definition for defining relationships between cause and effect of viruses and diseases. Now, we're told COVID-19 is a disease, and we're told that is caused by a virus. That disease and the virus, right? We have SARS-CoV-2, the virus, which causes COVID-19, the disease. That's what we're told. Now, if we were to follow the scientific evidence for defining this relationship between virus and disease, you would have to go by Koch's postulate. That is how you define these such things in the medical legal field. In order to prove Koch's postulate, you must first take the bacteria must be present in every case of the disease. Now, that's not true in this case. Not every person that had COVID-19 had SARS-CoV-2. And not every person that had SARS-CoV-2 got COVID-19. And that's why we have these RT-PCR tests coming up with 80% false positives of a viral infection that didn't cause a disease, and these outrageously inflated numbers of this, that, and the other. It's because they're testing for the wrong thing. They don't realize that they're testing for one thing. They should be testing for another thing. And when one does not necessarily cause the other. The bacteria must be isolated from the host with the disease and grown in pure culture. That, again, has never been done with SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19. Never been done. The specific disease must be reproduced when a pure culture of a bacteria is inoculated into a healthy, susceptible host. Actually, we have tried this and it's failed. We have failed to give a culture of the bacteria to another person and have them develop the disease. We call those people asymptomatic carriers. Those are people who develop absolutely no symptoms and they remain completely healthy. So that's never been fulfilled. The bacteria must be recoverable from the experimentally infected host. So not only do they have to give SARS-CoV-2 to a host, that develops COVID-19, they have to be able to extract COVID-19 from that person, give it to a new person, and then be able to extract SARS-CoV-2. You have to get the bacteria must be recoverable from the experimentally infected host. That has never happened. So this is to determine whether there is a cause and effect relationship between bacteria and a clinical disease. So according to legal and medical definition, SARS-CoV-2, the virus, does not cause COVID-19, the disease. That is by definition. And that will be by definition until they can show these four things to approve Koch's postulates. So far it has failed all four of Koch's postulates, which actually indicates that they are not related. SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19 are completely unrelated. And I actually have my own theories as to what is related to these things, but that's not for this video. That's for more of my scientific level videos that I will be making later. This is just a legal video. So what do we have here? Novel coronavirus disease, COVID-19. Okay, so this is our local health county advisory notice, and they go through a lot of different things here, like where they say virus, but then they write COVID-19. It's a disease, not a virus. And it's furthermore, it's not been proven to be associated with the virus either. So they're locking down things based on a communicable disease that they label as a virus. Right, it's a communicable virus, SARS-CoV-2, not a communicable disease, COVID-19. In fact, all of the paperwork that I can find, they kept saying virus, COVID-19, spreading COVID-19. The disease isn't what spreads. The virus is what spreads. You cannot give COVID-19 from one person to the next. You have to give, according to them, SARS-CoV-2 to the next person who will develop COVID-19 based on that virus. Diseases are not spreadable person to person. Viruses are spreadable person to person. So all of these local health orders that our local health officer, Teresa Rankovich, wrote mean absolutely nothing. They're garbage. You might as well just throw these in the trash. They mean absolutely nothing. When you read them and the way they say, SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, disease, virus, the way they use the language is so interwovenly wrong and incorrect that it's not even usable in a legal setting. This would never hold up in the court of law. A judge would laugh at this. This would be burned. And then you look at the state of California, local emergency. You know, I have, this is the Humboldt County local emergency, which they're claiming confirmed cases. There's no such thing as a confirmed case. There's no such thing as a test for COVID-19, right? It's a RT-PCR test only tests for a sequence of DNA that can exist in anything. This is why we have tigers and dolphins and other tests testing positive for COVID-19. It's a protein sequence. Everyone already has this protein sequence in their body. It's whether it's shedding or not, and it's whether it's detectable or not. It's not about confirming the case of COVID-19. That's actually such wrong language that I don't think that this could hold up in court at all anyways, just based on confirmed cases. Nobody in the world has been confirmed to have COVID-19, period. I don't care who you are. There is no test for the entire genome sequence for COVID-19. You know how I know that? Because the entire genome sequence for the COVID-19 still has not been isolated and observed as per the Koch's postulate. It still hasn't even been observed. We don't even know the whole thing yet, let alone confirmed that people have it. This is doublespeak. This is a way to get people to acquiesce to a set of laws and a set of language that they don't understand. This is not informed consent, because this is not information. This is misinformation. If anything, this is misinformed consent. This is tricking people into thinking something is what it isn't. SARS-CoV-2 is not COVID-19, period. Then we have the state of California. An outbreak of respiratory illness due to the novel coronavirus, a disease known as COVID-19, and started in Wuhan City and spread outside. Well, we've already established that a disease is something that's wrong with your body, not something that spreads. A virus, a viral infection is what spreads. So again, I could go through, a page after page after page of how they use the wrong language, but you get the idea. 94,000 confirmed cases. Confirmed with what? Most cases in the world were confirmed due to assumptions. It was assumed positive. He had a sniffly nose. That's COVID-19. It's funny how the regular flu stopped killing people right when the COVID-19 came around and all these other things started. I don't want to get into the medical aspect because I'm just trying to keep it legal, but there is absolutely no legal basis behind confirming cases of COVID-19. There is no test for that. That is all based on a set of false assumptions that has nothing to do with science. This is all politics. What this all is politics. None of this has to do with science. None of this has to do with health or safety. This has to do with power and control, and to see how far we can take people and take away their rights and take away their constitution until this thing basically means nothing, right? We have constitutional rights to our own bodies. Period. I don't care what else you have to say. Health and safety, this, that, and the other, community. I don't care what you have to say. The Constitution gives me a right to my own body. Now we have the California Disaster and Civil Defense Master Mutual Agreement, which is basically what gives the governor the power to declare a state of emergency and what powers they get in a state of emergency. And what does a state of emergency mean, as per defined by the manual in which gives them the power? The state of emergency means the duly proclaimed existence of conditions of disaster or extreme peril to the safety of persons and property within the state caused by such conditions as epidemic. Now, what is an epidemic? So they are claiming a state of emergency in California based on an epidemic. So let's go. I have the definition of epidemic here. Epidemic refers to an increase, often sudden, in the number of cases of a disease above what is normally expected in the population in that area. Now, a disease, they're talking about a specific category of disease like respiratory infection, right? It's not just the specific strain of SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19, but it does say of a disease. So not SARS-CoV-2, they're specifically saying the COVID-19 part, and epidemic as opposed to an outbreak, which would be more of a viral infection. Now, Well, let's focus on what is expected in that population in that area. Okay. So in that area, so usually state of emergencies, especially health emergencies, are local. They have to do with city level, sometimes county level, very rarely state level, and a nationwide emergency, state of emergency, is something completely different. It's not going to be a local health emergency like we're seeing this SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19 BS. So what does that mean? Okay, so we actually had more deaths in 2018 in California than we do now in 2020. So we actually are down on disease death. And here's the weekly number of the death tolls, very within range of what we're expecting. And as of the date that I printed this, 5/27/20, tests run 5,723, positive cases 94, hospitalizations 12. By the way, hospitalizations 12, ridiculous that we had to lock down to flatten the curve to that our hospitals won't be overwhelmed. I know people who work at these hospitals. People are getting furloughed, fired. They're shutting down full departments. This is a scam. This is a fucking scam. Deaths 2. What a joke. What a joke. Like, I'm just mad. I'm mad at this point that they killed, and you know what the part is they probably killed these 2 people by doing what they did. Probably put them on a respirator. I'm beyond myself that this is a state of emergency. 2 deaths. 2 deaths in my county. We had to lock down. This is one of the strictest counties in California. Every store has everyone wearing masks, everyone social distancing, every place shut down. All the mom and pop shops are now homeless. You know, they're bust. And in the emergency powers, the term emergency can apply to any situation where quick action is needed to prevent or mitigate the adverse situation. Close the area to where the emergency occurred to protect the public health. These events are typically small in scale and within the means of the local authorities to handle, and therefore require no political action to invoke extraordinary powers. An outbreak of disease may require quick action to prevent its spread, and in this sense may present an emergency situation for public health officials. The proclamation of a local emergency and state emergency, they have no basis. When you read through these documents of what they describe as a local emergency or a state of emergency, and then you reference back what an outbreak is, what all this is, epidemic, 2 deaths, 2. It's probably different in your county. That's fine. I'm talking about my county and why I stand up for my own rights as a human being and as a citizen. Sounds like an emergency to me. It sounds like we should shut down everything. Sounds like we should just rip this up, burn it, throw it in the trash because it no longer means anything, because health and safety from some officials that actually unlawfully act as your doctor and have absolutely no idea what they're talking about when they say the virus of COVID-19 is spreading. They have no idea what they're even talking about. This is tyranny. This is not what America is supposed to be. This is what America is supposed to be. Don't forget that.